There's only one place to start today. With his finger spin and carom ball, he had us all enthralled. Then he slapped on his pads, and boy, he could bat, saving games with his runs, over 500 wickets and a fair few tons. 11 Man of the Series awards, and a bowler's end run-out meant he crossed swords with those who didn't know it was in the rules for him to win. But now we all unite and say, Nandri, Ashwin. It is, of course, the Kumble Corner, or as today I'd like it to be called, the Ashwin Apex or something. I'm Super Joshi, joined by Nakul Pande and Karthik Krishnaswamy, ESPN Crick info writer. Karthik, should we start with you? Not least because you weren't here last time. We are obviously going to review the Test match in Brisbane, but first we need to talk about the big kind of breaking story that happened kind of at the end of that, or in between that. If you go by when hugs happened, you can do the chronology. Let's talk about Ravichandran Ashwin's retirement from all international cricket.
Yeah, I mean,
What
it came as
was
a
your initial thoughts?
complete shock for me. First, I mean, I saw all of the rumors on Twitter from various Indian journalists going like, "Watch out, a big legend is going to retire today" and stuff. So somehow word has got out, and turns out he had been kind of thinking about it ever since Perth. I think, I think being away on a five-test series kind of does this, right? Like when you're not in the 11 and there's two other spinners and like you're 38, and there's been a history of not playing test matches outside of outside Asia, and so yeah, it must have been brewing in his mind for a while. And from what I read, apparently he decided on day 4 that this is it, and day 5 made the announcement. So yeah, it yeah, shocked me because I thought there was a couple of years left in him for sure, right? I don't think his bowling has, if it has dipped at all, I don't think it's dipped to any extent for people to worry whether he can still like cut it at that level, right? Yeah, uh,
No
yeah.
one
But
thought
then,
that.
but
I mean,
then looking at the schedule as well, and not that many tests in India in the near future, and he's good enough to play anywhere in the world. I believe this for all through his career, and yeah, even now. But I guess all of these things adding up, and just being away for such a long tour, 5 tests, and you're not even playing it. I don't think his family was there in Australia with him either, so it does tend to weigh on your mind. So yeah, I
but
mean,
he could have had
what a career he's had.
if I can be flippant, he could have had a few more weeks in Australia. It's a nice place. It's not like he was on tour in Bangladesh or somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's first world. But that's the measure of the man. I think it's fair to say he put the team first. Uh, Knuckle, how much of Washi's presence do you think had to do with his decision and the timing of it,
Uh,
or even Jadeja's presence?
it's hard. It's hard to know. I mean, he should be fairly used to Jadeja's presence by now, to be honest. But one of his friends posted on Instagram. I didn't believe it even when you shared this with me a few months ago that you were thinking
Right.
about it. So it's it's almost a bit of a cliche about him, but Ashwin doesn't do things without thinking about it, without really examining in minute detail the potential consequences of it. So this is the idea that the idea that, as his father seemed to say, that this was because he wasn't playing and was humiliated, seems to not quite be accurate.
And he tweeted
So
basically,
this is something.
"Uncle ko mind mat karna" is what he said.
Yeah. He said, "Dad, calm down, and guys, stop talking to my dad. He doesn't know what he's talking about," which was fantastic. And Ashwin is in now he is in his late 30s, and I'm sure the outward signs were, he didn't have a particularly good New Zealand series, but he's still bowling beautifully. He still bowled really well in Adelaide, actually. In that Test match, bowled tremendously well, and but something has evidently flipped, that he has decided that now is the best time to make a clean break with it, to still do it while it's on his terms, which not many athletes get to do, and from the outside it doesn't look like the most opportune moment. You know, he's not retiring after winning a World Test Championship final or helping win another Test series. He's not going like Murali after getting to a big milestone or something like this. He retires after not playing, and we find out about it basically through Indian journalists in Brisbane putting two and two together, and people watching, you know, Kohli hugging him in the dressing room. And maybe he had told everyone by that point. It seems quite likely that he had told everyone internally by that point. You know, he's told the press officer, for example, and that he's going to be in the press conference. But Ashwin being one step ahead of everybody is actually quite fitting for the international cricketer that he was and has been.
Yeah. I want to cast your minds back to Chennai a little bit. The game there at Chepauk. There was a lot of talk at that point that this is, this potentially his last game. I think partly down to the touring schedules and when the next Test match there would be. But there was a lot of talk there, and there are also some other conjecture I've heard that he was kind of persuaded to go on this tour, that he was actually ready to call it a day before this. Do you think, actually, maybe, Keiko, this is a question for you more so. You hadn't heard anything along those lines, or did you think that was just, they're just saying it because of his age?
I think they're just saying it because of his age, because especially since this was an Australia tour, right?
Yeah.
And you cast your mind back to 2021. He was one of the players of India's series win on that tour. So there's no way India would have not wanted to take Ashwin along, even though 3-0 had happened at home, even though Washington Sundar had emerged. Especially after Kuldeep Yadav, who I think right through the year, a lot of people were like, damn, this guy bowling on Australian pitches is going to be something. But then, he has his fitness issues and he has a surgery, so he can't go either. So with all that, and with Ashwin's quality and his record in Australia, there's no way they were not going to take him there. And I don't think there would have been any such communication to him either. I just think it's the sort of coming together of all of these factors that, he realized he's away for so long from home. He's got 2 young kids, and not playing. It's got a gnaw at him, right? So it's pretty much that.
That's there's two things. One, not playing, and then being away from his kids at the same time, especially when Virat's wife and kids are there. Joshi Bai's wife and kids are there as well. That doesn't help probably either. Even he's human at the end of the day, and he is India's most famous cricket YouTuber, so he probably thinks, I can do this work from home lifestyle. I don't need to be away anymore, do I? There's probably an element of that. You talked about not playing abroad. What are your thoughts on Wigan? There's so much to discuss, and it's like at the moment it's just a bit of a nebulous cloud. Just pick things to talk about. Aside from his numbers, you made the point that he could have played anywhere, and he did, and he was great everywhere. And I think most of us, pretty much all of us, were looking forward to him playing at least in Sydney, if not the MCG, even if there was perhaps going to be some rain there. But it has been said that he didn't play as much abroad because of Jadeja, basically, just because he was there and could get in on the strength of his batting. And do you think there's a certain amount of wistfulness from him as well, perhaps, or a little bit of what could have been? I could have played more abroad. Had he played more abroad, he probably would have been. I don't think this podcast would be called Kumble Corner then. I think he would have been a higher wicket taker, perhaps. He'd had a few more Test matches in him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you
Ashwin doesn't strike me as the wistful type. He doesn't strike me as the type to worry too much about what might have been.
He's too logical, too intelligent,
and it's partly because of that analytical mindset, because of that because of that desire to keep improving, because of that desire to keep working out what's next. There's all this net footage that you see of him trying different things, trying leg breaks. He experiments with bowling in different shirt sleeves. He tries different run-ups. He comes over the wicket, round the wicket, through and round, through and over, which is something that doesn't really happen very much, where he starts like he's going round the wicket, then comes in between the umpire and bowls over the wicket. We see him figuring out things on the fly in the middle of test matches, changing his seam positions and changing his releases and all of these things. And Nathan Lyon has talked about learning from Ashwin on the 2017 tour, where Lyon was so brilliant about bowling with a little bit more undercut, trying to get the ball in as at a flatter trajectory rather than so that beautiful up and over spin to try and maximize the fact that the pitch will do the work for you. You hear other spinners talking about Ashwin, and they're kind of, even really good spinners like Nathan Lyon, are kind of in awe of his abilities. There might be a little bit of kidology in this, but the Australians have been going out of their way to praise Ashwin since the announcement. There was a wonderful clip from Star Sports of their reporter breaking the news to Lyon and Harbhajan Singh, who looked like he'd just come from a golf pro.
He probably did.
He always, it's either a golf pro-am or he's just been DJing a Punjabi wedding.
Both are possible. He was an MP for a while. I don't know if he still is, but that's all part and parcel.
Yeah, and the he. And going back to what you talk about playing away from home, I was looking these up and was partly for work and partly for personal reasons. Overall, in the test matches they played together in Australia, Lyon and Ashwin have basically identical records. And on the last three tours, so 2018, 2020, 21, and this one, Ashwin only played 5 test matches on those tours, but significantly outperformed Lyon on every metric. In terms of wickets, economy, average, and strike rate. And if you look at his record against opposition spinners outside of Asia, so he played 32 test matches outside of Asia, took 104 wickets at 33. Now, in and of itself, that's pretty decent. It's not outstanding, but it's decent. And certainly, as this seam attack has developed, it's become even more useful. Forget the fact that he's scored 200s in the West Indies and made match-winning, match-saving efforts with the bat as well, just for a second. Opposition spinners in those same 32 tests, 81 wickets at 43.
Yeah.
So, a little bit like with James Anderson, the perception somehow never caught up with the reality, which is that Ashwin was a very solid cricketer who was good enough, as Karthik said, to perform in conditions that weren't necessarily favourable to him. And he was absolutely lethal if you gave him the slightest hint of something helpful for him. The extent to which he outbowled opposition spinners on helpful pitches is even more staggering. He's 20-30% better than spinners in those same helpful conditions. Partly, I've had my rant before about why would you prefer sharply turning pitches when your spinners are so much better than the opposition that they don't need the help. But this is a guy who. What is fascinating about Ashwin to me from the outside, I haven't met him. I cover most of my cricket from a bit of a remove. But what fascinates me is that there are plenty of cricketers who think very deeply about the game. There are plenty of cricketers who are, the job is trying to figure out challenges on the fly. What fascinates me about Ashwin is that he can identify and talk about the challenges that he's going to face. He can internalize them to the point that he can then externalize them. You have to have things very clear in your mind before you can express them. He then goes out and does it, and then does it again and again and again, and has to change when somebody adapts to him. And then he's able to analyze afterwards what he's done, a lot of people in all walks of life get very wrapped up in the analysis to the point where they can't actually perform because they're thinking about too many things. They are, and so when you get to the point of trying to do something on impulse, that you're working against yourself. Ashwin, barring maybe a very brief period in maybe 2013 or so, 2014, I think that South Africa tour, and maybe sort of the England tour in 2014, the sort of the last gasp of India being terrible at home, where maybe he was trying too many things and trying to make things a little bit more complicated for himself. And the Australia tour in 2014 as well, where he was the last time that he and Jadeja were left out, both left out of a test match, that test in Adelaide, and maybe he was thinking about too many things and getting overly wrapped up in the variation. That was a very, very brief window. And literally for the last decade, he has been able to move seamlessly between the performance and the analysis wherever relevant. And that is so hard to do when your mind is working that quickly. When you are so cerebral and analytical and so much potentially given or prone to over-analysis, to then be able to switch into that competitive, reflex-driven instinct, perform as though it's the most natural thing in the world that you've never had to think about. Maybe Shane Warne could do it, of cricketers that I have seen.
I was going to make a joke about stereotypically intelligent South Indians, but you've mentioned Shane Warne, so it's ruined my gag.
Maybe you see it. I've seen Joe Root change batting approaches on the fly. Stephen Smith. There are very, very, very
these are all-time greats
who've been able to
basically
do that. Yeah, there are very, very few cricketers who've been able to do that, who have the mix of. Jared Kimber came up with a good line that this isn't someone who does theories; he does field work. Ashwin was an empiricist, not just a theorist. And I don't think any of them were able to do it to the extent that Ashwin did, and it just made him, quite apart from the skill and the joy that you get watching any great spinner, it made him just so incredible to watch, because you were watching the body and the mind working at the same time, and it made even spells where theoretically nothing was happening just kind of unmissable. He wasn't a bowler you really wanted to miss a ball of, because there was always something in there.
And there are some these kind of, I guess, truisms thrown around about spin bowling being an art, and also but also a certain level of science, and the bowlers have to think and plans. He embodied that. I mean, you watched it bowl the balls, and you were like, wow. But there was a plan around it. And sometimes, you mentioned Jared Kimber, and I saw his kind of summation of Ashwin, or tribute, if you want to say. And he mentioned that Ashwin, essentially probably got a bit bored while he was bowling, and would just chuck in random variations, probably to keep himself entertained, actually. And that's just kind of, how it was.
But a lot of cricketers who do that, who do it in a way that ends up being detrimental to the team, because you lose focus, because it's almost like a symbol that you've lost focus, that you're not paying attention, that you're that actually sticking to the plan is the important thing. Ashwin again was able to do that, but never letting his performance drop, never letting his concentration waver, never straying from the task at hand, and balancing all of those things at once for so long, in so many different conditions and to such a high level, is just pretty extraordinary.
And then on top of that, come in and save the team with the bat as well. Then going into the top order, going, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Can you help out here?
Again, I'm sort of expressing this in statistics, but only two players who had more than 300 plus wickets scored more runs. Only one took 105 for more in the same test. Like,
and you see, Nakul,
the batting is almost like he was a very, very solid number 7 or 8, but it's almost like his bowling was so good that the batting is just like he would have got Karthik, maybe you'll agree with, if he could have batted like a mixture of Courtney Walsh and Chris Martin and still would have got into India's 11.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the thing is, Nakul, these stats that you're saying, like, I hear these numbers and I'm like, yeah, cool, they're amazing. But I don't think they reflect how good he actually was. I think maybe it's having seen, I've pretty much seen his whole career, and I just feel that he was better than these numbers. He was more. Probably a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah, and these are really good. These are really good numbers.
I feel the numbers do him justice.
These are amazing numbers. Yeah, which is bizarre when he's got objectively incredible numbers. Like it's. I've said this a few times that it's weird that a bowler with 537 Test wickets, a contender to be in India's all-time greatest Test 11, a contender for greatest Test 11 of the 21st century or the last 40, 50 years, whatever, is somehow underrated and underappreciated, and we're still finding, now that he's retired 13 years into his, or 14 years into his international career, new things, new ways of expressing how good he was. I tend to fall back to numbers and digging into the numbers because it helps me solidify around those numbers a concept of how good he was, and also because it's easier for me than, I can't show you, long highlights packages of his particular of his one particular spell. It would it helps me contextualize, and then what I would then urge everybody to do is go and so go and watch his spell on the World Test Championship final in 2021. Go watch him bowl at Edgbaston in 2018, where he bowled magnificently. The third test, I think, of that tour as well, the Southampton test match where he bowled magnificently as well. Go watch him in Australia on the last couple of tours, and just think about what and watch a couple of his hundreds in the West Indies. Go watch him and Vihardi, that incredible partnership in Sydney, where the two of them, if you put them together, barely had a functioning body, and they figured out a way of maximizing or hiding their respective weaknesses. So Ashwin only plays one type of bowling, Vihardi only plays the other, and they just keep going and going and going and going, and hopefully that allows you then to. It helps you frame what you're looking for.
Karthik, I think Nakul touched on his teamwork there, even in his kind of leaving speech. Actually, I'm going to go on a little aside here. I was going to bring something later on, but I think I remember, and you guys can correct me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but I think Kumble retired against Australia, and he did this whole speech, and people like Gilly were. Well, it was a very nice moment. These teams were obviously fighting against each other. This wasn't that long after Sydney, really, I don't think, but there was a lot of. It was just nice, and I think when Gilchrist retired, it was something similar. And part of me is a little sad that Ashwin, the orator he is, kind of deserved that packed stadium, a microphone, and all the rest of it. But maybe he just took himself out of contention for the team's sake. But also in his kind of goodbye, what does he do? He talks about thank you to Virat, to Rohit, and a couple of others, because of whom I took these wickets, who took the catches. Your thoughts on that? I mean, this guy is selfless, and maybe that's why maybe that's why we don't think as much of him as we should, perhaps. Like Nakul said, we're still finding things, 14 years into his career.
I mean, I'm sure anybody who plays for that long and performs that well, and who's been in and out for factors beyond his control. That selflessness is part of what makes them, and that's true of him as well. I just want to like touch on a couple of points Nakul made. One is like that period in 2012-13 to like around end of 2014 where he wasn't like, there was a big dip in his performance, and both at home, especially in that home series against England, and away as well. And then kind of when he was left out in Adelaide, he worked with Bharat Arun in the nets and like figured out what was going wrong, and that triggered this complete like reversal in like, or like rediscovery of like who he was. And I spoke to him maybe a few months or a year after that, and he was like, look, I tried a lot of things with my load up, with my action, and somewhere that kind of messed up my fundamentals a little bit, but I don't regret any of that because I had to go through that entire circle to see what was, to understand for myself what was working for me initially, and actually know what I'm doing when I'm bowling, right? So this is a guy who was so confident in himself that he's like, even after figuring out, okay, this is what works for me, he still continued to like tinker with his bowling, with his batting. Like, you can observe over his entire career how his stance kept changing, how his backlift, his setup at the crease kept changing. He was relentlessly like, working on his game. Even when things were working, he was not afraid of tearing it up and starting over again or trying something different. And that's just what made him so different from anyone else. And that just took a lot of courage and like sort of self belief in how good he was, right? And in the face of all kinds of people, respected people, telling him, look, boss, just keep it simple. He's like, no, that's not who I am. You know, I wouldn't be Ashwin if I just kept it simple and just bowled into the rough all day and like waited for something to happen. That's not me, right? So that's what made him so good and so beautiful to watch as well, like Nakul said. And yeah, I mean, it's just both like his big blessing and curse that his career exactly coincided with Ravindra Jadeja's. Now, here's a guy who, you take out Ravindra Jadeja and Ashwin is like competing with Kapil Dev for India's greatest all-rounder. You take out
Exactly.
Ravindra Jadeja and he's undisputedly like uh, India's best spin bowling all-rounder. But then you throw Ravindra Jadeja into the mix, and then that makes India unbeatable at home to the extent that, we're sitting here and talking about, we take it for granted, right? That home record, that we're talking about Sydney and that partnership with Bihari, we're talking about how he bowled at Edgbaston, we're talking about how he bowled in Adelaide. All of that was brilliant. He was just as brilliant at home, and he had to work just as hard at home to get those wickets. But we take it for granted because they were, until that New Zealand series happened, there's no way for teams to like even, you know, I mean, like, you had to be really good to eke out like a one win out of, like out of the blue, and a lot of things had to go your way. But for like a decade, India were untouchable, like unbeatable at home, and so we take it for granted that these guys just showed up, bowled, won matches, and went away. That's not how it was. And yeah,
Some
so
of
on
us
the
who've
one,
seen some of us who've seen cricket before that kind of know what we saw and what we kind of
that's
appreciate it
right. I
more.
mean, look at the number
Yeah,
of look
it's
at
a
the
good.
number of draws that India had in, say, the early 2000s, right? From 2000 to 2010, 2011, there were so many home draws. And some of it was down to the pitches as well. But some of it was down to they didn't have this fully rounded, like lethal bowling attack for any kind of home conditions, which, through that decade of dominance, they had that. And yeah, we take that for granted. So that was one side of the Ashwin Jadeja equation. The other side, of course, is that they go away. And then, so England, like, it's not that English pitches are one thing, right? So you remember the 2009 Ashes and Australia complaining that England were like producing these really dry pitches for Graham Swan to like be the match winner, right? So England can still do that if they want, if they have the spinners or whatever. But then, like, you have an India team that's coming there with a really good pace bowling attack, but you also have Ashwin and Jadeja. You do not want to be facing, you do not want to be giving them conditions where they can play both of them. So it consistently happened that whether they were going to New Zealand or South Africa or England, and to a lesser extent in Australia, where the weather is hot and like second innings spinners do come into the game. But all of these places they were touring and relentlessly. It was like really green pitches, much greener pitches than say for a South Africa test in England or a South Africa test in New Zealand. So you would have Keshav Maharaj taking 5 wicket hauls in New Zealand, and like Ashwin and Jadeja didn't get that chance, and Ashwin and Jadeja didn't get the chance to play together in these conditions. And if you had to pick one of them, and you had to play four fast bowlers, it meant you had to pick someone who could bat at number 7 or sometimes number 6. And towards this part of Ashwin's career, Jadeja is like decidedly the better batter, and that it just all of these things came together, and Ashwin didn't play as much as he could have.
Yeah.
Partly also weirdly through the emergence of Shardul Thakur, because that's kind of who he was
I
competing for
yeah.
as the fourth bowler. Because certainly if you look at the World Test Championship final, Jadeja barely bowled in that. Jadeja was basically
Yeah.
playing as a batter, and actually through that whole England series in 2021, he barely bowled in the first 3 Test matches. He was basically playing as a number 6, number 7 batter, so they could occasionally give Rishabh Pant a little bit of time off. So I think the framing of that. India were incredible in that sort of the first 4 Test matches of that series, and outplayed England and outthought them. Weirdly, despite the fact that they actually got the conception of what Ashwin is wrong. It's a good point you make about the home Test match. You sort of elide 12 years of unbelievable dominance against some pretty decent teams and across a wild variety of pitches. Right? You look at how the pitches changed. Like we sort of elide them all into one. Like I go back to Australia 2017 because it's that wonderful series, and watching Ashwin and Lyon going up against each other in Bangalore in 2017, and then through that series, after Ashwin had been, in that weird pitch in Pune where Ashwin and Jadeja are turning the ball too much to hit the edge and too much to hit the stumps, and Steve O'Keefe, who doesn't really turn the ball, is suddenly getting LBWs left, right, and centre. And then India were very much in a position where they could have gone 2-0 down in that series, and the home run ends after 5 years, or less than 5 years, rather than 12. And Ashwin finds a way of being effective and of being lethal and of exerting himself on an Australia team trying to do something they hadn't done for, by that point, 9 years. Like it's Stephen Smith in the form of his life at that time. Patrick Cummins, who'd come back into the side in Ranchi. And that was... I covered a lot of that series for Guerrilla Cricket, and sitting up through the night and just watching Ashwin and Lyon figuring it out and sort of learning from each other as they went. And that was a series that India had a lot of injuries. Virat Kohli barely scored a run. He got injured in the late on. There was a huge amount that went in Australia's favour, and still Ashwin and everybody else were able to find a way and let their quality shine. And India won a series they probably should have lost. And that happened quite a few times. You think of towards the end of that run, think of England in 2021. England win and actually 2024, actually earlier this year, they win the first test of those series.
Australia 2023 as well.
And yes, absolutely. And in fact, this one in January is maybe even a better example, because those pitches were kind of back to what they'd been pre-pandemic. They were a bit of turn, but they were pretty neutral pitches. They were not pitches where you just land the ball on the same spot and just wait for 5 wickets to fall your way. I know it's not quite that simple, but that's kind of how it felt a little bit at times on some of the really sharply turning pitches. well, like you're basically just waiting for the batters to outthink themselves. Like, you know, Ollie Pope getting turned into all sorts of shapes of the alphabet in 2021 by Ashwin. And as soon as India needed him to show his quality, he did against some very, very attacking batting. You know, he would come on. He would, you know, Ben Duckett is playing him 360. Watching those battles were wonderful to watch throughout. Joe Root, a wonderful player of spin bowling, going up against Ashwin and trying to find ways of doing it. Like it might not have risen quite to those kind of epochal test match battles. I don't know if he had an Atherton versus Donald or a Steyn versus Tendulkar at Cape Town type of battle that quite stands out as iconic, but he had so many little ones over the years where often against the opposition's best batter, he would be going up against them as they were dominating other players and trying to find a way of getting through them to help India win. And he was able to do it time and time and time again. And the one opposition teams would look at a team sheet without Ashwin and breathe a little bit easier.
Yeah, for sure. And as fans, we were like, "Oh, did he?" Often, gents. I think we need to just purely because of time. We need to, I think, round this part of this episode up. But at the end of the series, the Australia series, we will be coming back to revisit Ashwin. Not least because he's talked about playing club cricket, which I assume means franchise and not like, I don't know, Burnley.
Well, he said he's playing. He said he wants to play. He said he wants to play Tamil Nadu Premier League. I wouldn't be surprised if he is in the county championship.
County. When I say club, to me,
if I can cut in a little bit. Sorry, I think he also means just playing in the TNCA league, like literal club cricket. He owns a club team as well there, and like he's going to play that. I'm very sure of that. So when I was coming up as like in my first job at the Hindu in 2008 and stuff. So back then, D. Vasu, who is now like a match referee and all that, he used to play for Tamil Nadu in the 80s and 90s. 2008, in his early 50s, he was still playing TNCA League. And part of me thinks Ashwin's going to be doing that.
Right. I wasn't sure if it was a difference between Indian English and other English. What he meant by
the other thing I really hope he might do is like, Tamil Nadu haven't won a Ranji Trophy in his life, not in his lifetime, but in his career. The last one they won was 1988 when he was a couple of years old, right? Yeah. So he's mentioned in the past that he'd like to win one, so maybe he'll give that a try.
That would be nice. Yeah,
that would be lovely too.
And it's also, he basically said in his he didn't basically say, he did say in his farewell speech that he is going to become a journalist, which presumably means a broadcast analyst. Don't be surprised if he pops up on ABC Radio or Fox or Seven or all of the above for this series.
Well, look, I think that's part of why perhaps he's more relatable to a lot of people, is because he talks about the game as much like a fan as perhaps other players don't. Like the three of us, he's also now retired from international.
But you're really like switched on and curious. Fan.
Yeah.
Like
he's
listening to him talk about cricket feels like you're talking to your really intelligent friend about interesting friend about cricket.
No, absolutely. It's kind of why I come on this podcast to hear you guys say things. It's basically this is how I feel. And like Ashwin, you two are also retired from international cricket as well, so that works. One final question on this, just to wrap this up.
I'm still available for as early as Boxing Day if I'm wanted. Just putting it out.
How are you against left-handers?
Oh, I'm an opening batter. Not going to bowl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I bowl exclusively googlies. I bowl exclusively googlies from around the wicket, so I'm there for there for the lefties.
That's good. I'm going to ask you a question which is really hard, but I just feel like it's probably the kind of question that Ashwin would ask. Give me one Test match that you think is iconic for you when it comes to Ravichandran Ashwin's career. KK, you first.
Okay. Iconic. This is not so much iconic as like personal.
Personally to you, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very because I mean, this is, you remember the 2015 South Africa series at home, and Bangalore, days 2, 3, 4, and 5 were rained out completely. So it was literally like one day drawn test, and he picks up a fifer on the first day, right? And it was like an education for me. Let's just put it that way. Where
Oh no, he's
you
frozen.
know, sorry.
You froze. Sorry, say that again. It was an education for you.
Yeah, it was an education for me, right? And this is like on a pitch where India won the toss and chose to bowl. They picked three seamers. It's a very odd kind of thing. And on the first day, he picks up like I don't know, 5 or 6 wickets. I don't exactly remember. And the thing that stands out for me most is, look, I'd been like covering cricket for a few years, but still like figuring my way out. And I mean, we all continue to figure our way out around the game. We've not played it at any great level, but on that day, I'm like watching his field setting, and like there's on a day one pitch, right? When he's bowling to like Faf du Plessis and Hashim Amla, two right-handers. There's no one between backward point and mid off, right? There's 6 guys on the leg side. There's a huge gap in the covers, and he's bowling, you know, mostly like pitching the ball outside off stump, and he's like, "Yeah, you drive me through the covers," but that just didn't happen. Like that sort of mastery of length and like what the ball can do in the air, and how many different ways he can, tie down batters and like kind of slowly just, you know, slowly chip away at them until, they're gone and someone else is there and facing that same inquisition from him. So that was just beautiful to watch, and that'll just stand out as one of the best experiences of my life covering like cricket.
Nakul?
Well, I've mentioned Bangalore in 2017 a few times. India under the cosh because of Lyons 8 there in the first innings, and the batting has failed, and Ashwin rocks up and takes just a magnificent. How many did he end up with? Did he end up with 7? I think he might have ended up with 7. Six for 40, 6 for 41, and wins India the Test match. A Test match that they really had no business winning. But honestly, the one that really stands out, I was just thinking about this, is the tour before, when England actually started that tour quite well in 2016, and it's Mumbai. It's the Wankhede Test match in that tour, because they're two completely different Test matches played in the same game. First test, the first half of the game, England make 400. The pitch looks quite flat. Ashwin works and works and works and works and ends up with 6 for in the first innings, and the game looks as though it is set up for a draw. So he took 44 overs to get his 6 wickets in the first innings. None of the seamers got any wickets in that in that first innings. India then, with Kohli in the form of his life, smashed them for 631, and England are suddenly thinking, "Oh God!" And then Ashwin takes 6 wickets in 20 overs in the second innings, and India win by an innings. And that is, I love the contrast of that, because there's the holding your own when things aren't going quite so well, when things are a bit harder, finding a way to be effective when nobody else is. Jadeja did take 4 wickets, but it was Ashwin really. And then in the second innings, it's the killer instinct, surgically, right, you've given me an opening, you are dead. And that is just magnificent to watch. Covered almost every ball of that series for in that Test match for Guerrilla Cricket, and did not regret the lost sleep for a second, largely because of Ashwin.
Amazing. Right. Slight pause. Nakul, it's 11. Do you need to go now?
Yes, I am going to bow out. I still feel like I've got the buzz for a couple more minutes in me, But I would like to thank the OGs.
You're going to look at our socials now at Kumble Corner, wherever you can find them. That's where you're going. KK and I will continue with a roundup of, which is ironic. It's actually deeply sad because you're the guy who knows about Lord Indra's connection with the BCCI or lack thereof. But we need to discuss that now.
No, just final point before I go. In Homer's Iliad, the gods are constantly changing sides, and I feel Lord Indra has taken a leaf out
Or
of
do you
their
think he
book.
just hates Australia more than the BCCI?
No, I think like an Olympian god, like Ashwin, he gets bored.
That is very fitting.
Goodbye.
Let's just. Well, there he is. He's gone. Right. Well, that leaves us to carry on. By the way, I think this is a good moment just to thank our listeners for following the channel and subscribing as well. Those of you that have done so, so thank you for that. KK, you mentioned rather fittingly a rain-interrupted Test match in your favourite Ashwin one. So look, we've compartmentalised the pink day-night match because it's an anomaly. Like when it comes to Australia and those, fine. Let's talk about this one. Nakul actually in our group referred to it as half a Test match, which is true, yes, from maybe a playing time point of view. But I feel a lot happened actually in the time that there was some cricket. India obviously decided to bat first at the Gabba, and sorry, bowl first. Yeah, decided to bowl first at the Gabba, and then proceeded to have the first day pretty much rained out, and Australia tonked 400. Which I think wasn't on the plans, was it really? They probably thought by the end of the day one they might actually be batting themselves. There was a lot to talk about in this game. Should we start off with KL, actually, at the top of the Indian batting order, and then we'll get onto the bowlers in a minute, just because I think that deserves its own section. KL and I guess Jadeja were probably the highlights of the Indian batting lineup. What did you make of it? And what were your thoughts while watching it?
Yeah, it's one of those odd ones, right? Like the early part of India's innings where Jaiswal flicks one uppishly and like that's not a wicket-taking ball, and he's gone. Shubman Gill drives loosely, gets like a really full one for Stark and from Stark, and he kind of goes for it. And I think that was more execution than like it not being a ball to drive. And he's gone, and suddenly like India like what on earth is happening, right? And Virat Kohli, I mean, he's done. How many times have we watched that same dismissal, right? Like I mean, there's this meme that was floating around sometime during I think one of the South Africa tours where somebody extended the wicket to like 12 stumps or whatever, and that's where he was meeting the ball with that drive and which he edged. Kind of happened again, and and I don't know. I think part of it was that Australia's fast bowlers just being like really good, of course, but also like really tall. And by that point, like there was some up and down bounds beginning to happen, and whenever they just hit it slightly short of a good length, you saw like Rahul getting hit on the wrist. There's one ball that reared up at Kohli's head, and he just had to like fend it away and could have gone anywhere. I think when all that happens, you tend to slightly get a little looser when, there's a half chance of like, a ball that you can put away for runs. And so I empathize a little bit with that, those top order, not so much like Jaiswal. And that happens sometimes. You just play a shot and it doesn't come off, right? But like Gill and Kohli and stuff, when all this is happening, you do tend to get a little looser and play shots of balls you might not otherwise do, and suddenly they're in deep, deep trouble. And Rahul, like he also like sends one streaky drive similar to Gill's, but just goes wide of gully and stuff. So sometimes you need that little bit of luck. Often in his career, he's been the guy who doesn't get that luck,
Didn't he
and then
get dropped as well
he gets dropped on the first ball of the next morning, right?
Yeah.
And like maybe he's due for a bit of luck, but
Yeah.
also like some that luck allows you to watch him and then see that hey, this is a guy with a beautiful technique and a method to survive these kinds of conditions and to score runs. And then you're like wistfully like thinking, how does he average 35 or whatever it is now over
Yeah.
such a, yeah, but he batted just wonderfully. And just the his alignment at the crease and the timing of his trigger movement, and then he's just in the right position. And
Maybe
yeah,
there's
he
an
might,
argument just for having playing abroad all year, so that whenever India tours somewhere, he's ready and already
I don't
warmed
know,
up.
like he's honestly, I think it's a bit overblown that he can't play at home, because like he scored a lovely 80 odd against England in Hyderabad. He
No, I
scored
meant
a
more
quick,
that he's better away, not that he can't play at home. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, scored a quick 50 against Bangladesh, and got injured quite a lot, and like didn't,
Mm.
in a small sample size, had a few failures. And then you have somebody like Sarfraz Khan, who can also like, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a
that,
little
that's
unfair to
more.
characterize him as he can, he's like your away condition specialist.
No, no, I think what you said there is really important. Actually,
Yeah.
um, a lot of his issues have been down to injury, actually, and then trying to
Mm.
come back from injury. It's not necessarily,
Yeah.
you know, form in the truest sense. And he
Hmm.
has had a lot of injuries for sure.
Yeah, it's not just injuries. I mean, it's sometimes form has contributed to him getting dropped. And biggest example of this is like uh, 2019 South Africa home series, where Mayank Agarwal comes in for him and scores like, I think, hundreds in the first two Test matches. Scores a double century against Bangladesh after that. I might be getting some of those numbers wrong, but like when India have had their most batting friendly home conditions during his career, he's somehow KL Rahul has somehow found a way to not be in the team, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just part of the way the dice is rolled for him right through his career, right? And
Mm.
would you say that KL Rahul wouldn't have scored at least like say 60% of the runs Rohit Sharma and Mayank Agarwal made in those two series? Then he might have, right? So
Yeah, of course.
all of these things have added up, and sure, I mean, he's played a part in it too. And it's also the fact that he's so versatile, that he has the kind of fundamentals where he can score like a, I don't know, a 14 ball 50 in the IPL, and he can go like 120 balls without scoring or whatever, something like that, without hitting
Mm.
a boundary at Lords, right? uh, he can do all of these things, but when you can do all of these things, one part of your game begins to bleed into the other. And just when you're peaking as a T20 player, there are like issues coming into your technique at the top of the order in Test cricket when you're playing a lot of your matches in really seaming pitches. So it's a very complex career, and I'm glad that he's getting a little bit of like acclaim for just how good he is now. And
Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's the KO conundrum. It's what it is.
yeah,
um, and before the episode, before we started recording, we were talking about Jadeja. You mentioned let's talk about Jadeja, and I started talking about Ashwin. You were like, we discovered the fact that I completely forgotten that he'd scored 77, even
yeah,
though I knew someone had scored a 70, and I was trying to rack my brains. And you said to me, that's kind of Jadeja's story. He plays these innings and kind of no one writes about it. So here's the time to talk to wax lyrical about Ravindra Jadeja, who actually I nearly met. And when I say I nearly met, I met Yusuf Pathan, who was outside of the shop at Heathrow. Ravindra Jadeja was inside the shop. I took a photo with Yusuf Pathan, and I was like, "Let me go board my flight." He's over there, and I was like, "You know what? Leave him to it." And I wish I'd actually taken a photo with Jadeja because I think he's a bigger star than Yusuf Pathan for sure. But that's an aside. Um, so yes, tell me about Ravindra Jadeja batting in this match. The floor
yeah.
is yours.
This is a guy in like last 5 6 years, longer probably, has just, he knows exactly like what his strengths are, what he's good at, what he's not so good at. You know, he he has a defense, a very lovely like minimalistic sort of defense that he can trust. He knows where his off stump is. He's happy to leave a lot of balls. And so generally, like, he comes in at 6 or 7, and for the first 30 odd balls, there's this sense of calmness that he brings, right? You know that he's probably going to be there for that little while, and he's going to score, say, 13, 14 runs at least. It's rare that he gets out early, really early, like as soon as he's in. And yeah, so he's built a wonderful batting record as well. And in this test match, he came in when at a perfect time. Like Josh Hazelwood comes in soon after Jadeja comes in, bowls 1 over, and then he's off. He's got
Mm.
a he's got calf awareness as according to CA's release, and he's out of the test match. And
This is
so
concerning
Australia,
because Boland's going to be back, but still, we've now got Boland awareness.
yeah. So I mean, Australia has suddenly they just have three bowlers, and Marsh doesn't bowl much, and
Mm.
plus the ball is old, and this is a bit of a new ball pitch, right? Where after 30 odd
Mm.
overs, the ball isn't doing much, and suddenly, like, these are good batting conditions, as even Head and Smith showed during, and Carey as well showed during Australia's innings, right? And Jadeja, yes, he gets all of that in his favor. And it's also part of the reason for his record being so good is that he bats in these kind of situations. But he has the game to capitalize on those situations. He knows what to do on this kind of pitch. He's showing the full face, like he's looking for scoring opportunities down the ground or square of the wicket, nothing through the covers. Like, there's too much bounce. I'm not going to play with an angled bat here, right? And he's
Mm.
just there. I'm just going to bat, and the runs will come, and they do. And it's uh, for most of his innings, his control percentage was somewhere around 95, reached 97 at one point, and that's incredible. But it's just the sign of a guy who knows his game inside out, knows what to do in what situation, what kind of pitch, and he just goes out there and does it. And yeah, it was very crucial innings as well, like in getting India close to that follow-on mark.
I think he could have got to 100. I'm not sure he had to play the shot he did in the end, but
Mm.
that's
That's been one thing that he's, you know, I think it's just I don't know. I don't think there's any underlying reason behind it, rather other than just these things happen.
yeah.
But when he's batting with the tail, he tends to kind of not quite things don't quite fall his way. When he takes a risk, he gets out. Or if he's like trying to farm the strike, he's not out, the other guys get out, and like then
Mm.
it's happened a few times in his career. He's faced some criticism for it, but I don't think there's any issue on in this match. I think Cummins, I mean, he bowled very cleverly in that over where he's like, look, we're bringing in all the guys in front of the wicket, but we're leaving all the square guys out on the boundary. I'm going to bowl
Mm.
short. If you want to take it on, take it on. He took it on. He got out.
Fair enough. And then the
Yeah.
DSP came and went pretty much without bothering anyone. And
Mhm.
I've heard actually the people in the Indian team also refer to him as DSP for fun, which is quite funny. Siraj, that
Why
is.
wouldn't you?
Um,
Why wouldn't you?
yeah, why would you? It's quite hilarious.
It's yeah.
So yeah, and it's also something that I think people outside of India wouldn't understand. They're like, hold on, you've got a guy who works for the railways, you've got a guy who's in the police. What the hell's going on? These are cricketers. It's India, and this is incredible India. Um, and then came the second coming of Dravid and Lakshman,
That's right.
Bumrah and Akashdeep. And I was watching that, and I saw Akashdeep just smack that six over off Cummings, and I was like, like, just instinctively just went just swore, and I was like, oh, what? I couldn't believe it. It was a brilliant shot, and that off to a number 11 of Cummins, who is basically the future Prime Minister of Australia. If you think of a fast bowler who's won the captain and is likable, actually, he would perhaps not compared to others in other countries, no names mentioned, but I think he probably could be a shoo-in for the Prime Minister of Australian future. But as an aside, yeah, that shot was incredible, and I just thought, wow, we've got something here. And the celebrations were quite nice on the pavilion because in the pavilion, because as much as I think, oh, it's like celebrating a draw or whatever, it's not mentality, but actually that was important in the context of the game and potentially the series, because it just adds a bit of pressure. Tell me you enjoyed Akashdeep and Brahma. Go on, tell me how much you enjoyed it.
Oh man, it was beautiful. And here's the thing, right? I mean, of course, you should celebrate a draw when you've been behind in a game, and
Yeah, yeah,
you've fought so hard to make that happen, right? And yeah, sure, weather came into it and stuff, but you had to, I don't know, struggle through a really difficult period, and like basically your number 10 and 11 get you over the line in the most
yeah,
improbable of ways. And so, of course, you should celebrate. And people were bringing up like 2005 Ashes, and like, oh, Australia were celebrating the not Trent Bridge, where was it? Old Trafford draw, and that's why that's when we knew we are going to win this. It's all after the fact, like after the series is done, you make
yeah,
up all these narratives, right? I mean,
yeah.
India drew the Sydney Test in 2021, and of course they celebrated it because they had to work bloody hard for it, and
Yeah. Well, that's the
so
point of
yeah,
Test cricket. I think people miss, right? In Test cricket,
yeah,
draws are an achievement.
of
Um,
course, yeah,
Test cricket is an allegory for life. Sometimes on a Friday after 5 days, you're happy just to get through it, through the week. And that's what it
absolutely that.
is.
It's it's beautiful, and like as much as I love this era where like this was only the second draw of 2024,
Mm,
right? And that's crazy, but so it's such a results era that sometimes like this sort of fighting draw where you really had to work for it, you miss that kind of result. This was that kind of match, and it also reminds you the beauty of having the follow on and
mm.
the sort of tension that that brings in. If that hadn't existed, right, you lose so much time in a test match. It's inevitably going to be a draw if you're like day 4 and only the second innings of the match is still going on. But then that added element of, okay, these guys don't get to the follow on score, there's still scope here for something to happen. And all of that narrative tension made this quite an enjoyable watch, really. And even day 5, when, India had saved the follow on, but Australia kind of tried to make a match of it, and India suddenly ran through their top order. So it was a fun match to watch, despite like, you know, the weather kind of ruining it.
Yeah, I mean, it really
Yeah,
was. It really, that's exactly it. It was fun.
yeah,
I mean, talking fun. There's one quote of Siraj that I'm minded of, and that I've picked up. I think of it all the time.
we
And
all
before I
do. I
say
know
it,
which one it is. Yeah,
yeah, and I want to say importantly, right? This is not. I'm not mocking Siraj's English here, because
yeah,
actually the way he says it, the beauty of language is the sentiment you express,
yes,
and it's the sentiment that he expressed in this language the way he could. That is
yes,
brilliant when he says, "I am only believe on Jussie Bay," and I think we all only believe on Jussie Bay because
100%.
Bumrah
Yeah,
once
100%.
again,
And
first inning, second innings.
100%. The reason, and I'm glad you brought that up, the reason why it's resonated with everybody in India, every cricket fan, is that, no one's like, oh, haha, look at Siraj Singh. That's not it. It's like he's expressing something that we all feel in the most
Mm,
earnest of ways, right? And Siraj,
yeah,
you can't find a more earnest cricketer than him. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I tweeted during the match that it must be so hard for like captains to refuse taking DRS when he's bowling because he just pleads with those big eyes of his, right? And so, in that earnest way, is like I'm only believe on Jassi Bhai, and we are all only believe on Jassi Bhai because he
absolutely,
finds a way.
absolutely.
He finds a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
and truth be told, he didn't start this Test match that well on that truncated first day. Maybe his lengths and his lines, he was bowling a little too straight to Khwaja, maybe a little too short at some other times. For those 13.2 overs or whatever, India weren't quite at their best. Next morning, he comes in and boom, like opener's gone. He knows exactly what to do and he does it. This guy, it's magic, right? And
Mm,
I think every wicket he takes in the first innings, and I think most in the second as well, are like either caught behind or caught in the slip cordon. Whereas, like a lot of his wickets leading up to that through the series have been bowled LBW as well. So he's like, he just finds that one length, and it's not about like, okay, I need to bowl fuller or whatever. It's like, I don't know, 5 points maybe in his brain, I don't know how it works, but like 5.6 meters here, and then he
mm,
goes out and does it, and it was just beautiful to watch. And then second new ball after that big partnership with Head and Smith, he comes in and in no time 3 wickets. Smith, Marsh, and Head. again, the same kind of dismissal over and over. And these guys know what's coming, but they're powerless when he bowls in those areas and gets the ball to do what he gets it to do. He's just a magical bowler. And I just add one thing to that, in that, like, I think Akashdeep bowled brilliantly right through the test match, and he was super unlucky to not get to just get one wicket in the first innings, where
Mm.
I think he had 53 false shots, and like only the 53rd false shot got him a wicket. On average, I think in Test cricket, every 10 false shots get you a wicket. So he should have, by rights had a fifer, got just one
Yeah,
wicket.
on that, it feels. I mean, often when I watch Shami, sometimes I feel like Shami's bowling too well to catch a wicket,
Mm.
and or he deserves more wickets than he gets. And from what you said, it feels Akashdeep kind of had one of those games. On
Yeah,
another day, he's getting a fifer,
yeah,
like you
that's
said.
right. Yeah, it happens, and it's just happened to be one of those games. I was very happy for him that he came in and played that innings, and he shouldn't be batting at 11. He should not be. He should only be batting at 11 if Siraj and Bumrah are replaced by, I don't know, like Cummins and Stark or something, right?
Right.
Uh, right? Like, how is he batting at 11 in this team? But anyway, maybe it was some weird kind of tactical move and it worked. Uh, so I was very pleased for him that he got those runs and in the way that he did as well. And then that he got a couple of quick wickets on that final day as well. So, yeah, he's a fantastic cricketer, and like great to see him show that he can do it in Australia as well.
Mm, absolutely. Final word on Rohit Sharma's captaincy, then, because he got a bit of stick, a bit of criticism, particularly for the Australia's first innings. And
Mm.
look, I watched the Adelaide game, and it reminded me a little bit of Bangladesh, where he seemed a little bit lost. Um, and it didn't seem proactive enough. I know that he's obviously a chilled out character, and that's kind of part of his appeal. Do you think he could have done more, or was it just one of those things? It just happens. Travis Head is a pain in the ass, we know.
Mm.
Smith gets century. Yeah, Coley got one in the first game. He's going to get one. Smith's a brilliant player, one of the all-time greats. And there was only so much drinking Sharma could have done, or do you think Sharma could have done more um,
I
to
think
wrestle control?
I think I think a lot of the problems and the visual way the problems manifest themselves to like audiences. I think a lot of them stem from India's selection, and I mean, Nitish Kumar Reddy has done really well with the bat in this series, sure,
Mhm.
but I don't think you should be picking him if he's going to bat at number 8, because he's not offering enough with the ball. If you have Jadeja at 7, you need. I mean, India over the last so many years have been playing five proper bowlers, right?
Uh-huh.
Wherever they go, whether it's at home where they have the luxury to do that because of their spin bowling all rounders, or
Yeah.
frequently away from home, even when they've not had Shardul Thakur, they played like Ishant Sharma batting at number 8, or like Umesh Yadav batting at number 8. This has
Mhm.
happened, and to then go from that to this series where they're hedging their bets and like Nitish Kumar Reddy at 8. Once that happens, and once on a pitch like this, especially when the ball doesn't do so much after it gets old, you need more depth of bowling, and they didn't have it there. And once that happens, your captain's inevitably going to look a little clueless. I mean, whether it's Rohit Sharma, whether it's Virat Kohli, whether it's MS Dhoni, it's just the nature of the game. These are quality batters. Like Travis Head there's so little margin for error when you're bowling at him, right? Whether it's spin
Mm.
or pace. And then when you don't have like the best possible bowlers bowling at him, he's going to murder you, which is what happened. And there was a period right after tea on day 2 where it was Jadeja from one end and Nitish from the other. It just looked like they were waiting for the second new ball. And then you can empathize with the captain for waiting for the second new ball, because you're like, otherwise you're going to bowl Bumrah and like Siraj or Akashdeep or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
a combination of them, and then you get the new
Could
ball
he
and who are you bowling?
could he have got one of the part time spinners to throw a few overs on the other side, or would you think that would have lost control?
But your question itself is the answer, right? Like, do you really want a part-time spinner bowling on that pitch?
Yeah,
So
that's exactly
yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it worked in Perth. It just because India kind of had the better of the bowling conditions as well, and Bumrah was just unplayable, and things fell in their favor, and uh, it worked in Perth, but I think in Adelaide and Brisbane, the flip side of having not enough bowling was exposed for India, and I think they have to rethink that going forward in the series.
Australia struggled with that through injury, I guess.
Yeah.
Not having enough bowlers. I've, it reminded me before of like Bhuvaneshwar Kumar just disappearing on the first morning of a test and then you're screwed. And that happened in England.
Zahir Khan in
It was
2011.
Zahir Khan.
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. It was Zahir. Yes,
Yeah.
and that was I think the tour where we expected him to basically just destroy. It was England he was playing. Bhuvi, I'm sure this happened to Bhuvi at some point as well, no? Or Bhuvi never
I
actually
think
got injured in warm ups, probably.
2018 he missed the test series, right, when he was expected to be
Yes.
the main threat on
I
English
think that's what I'm
pitches.
thinking of.
So yeah.
Mixing it up.
He got injured during the ODI series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that point, he was pretty much only an ODI player, mostly anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Um,
It was kind of similar that suddenly, after many years of seeing India having relentless sort of bowling attacks where they have options all the time, and win or lose, they did lose a lot of tests, but win or lose, they were not giving the opposition batters any kind of breathing room, right? And
mm,
to go from that to this series where they have been able to kind of have a genuine, say, like fifth bowler to face, or a genuine like Jadeja in the first innings on these pitches is because of conditions going to be limited to a holding kind of role. So when you
yeah.
have only three strike bowlers, visually, I mean, when you're watching, it just becomes obvious that India can't keep control over the scoring and keep stay in test matches like they have done for so many years.
So part of it's down to availability. Obviously, if Nandri wasn't was available, then it would be a different story. I think perhaps part of it's just Gautam Gambhir learning curve. Maybe
It could be,
what do
and
you think?
part of it maybe in this game to give them some, you know, I don't know, put myself in their shoes. Like maybe they like look at the forecast and like this is probably going to be a draw, so might as well safeguard our batting a little bit. Worked
Hmm?
out in that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Gautam Gambhir's first tour of Australia, 3 matches in, he's won all. I mean,
Yeah, you
many
can't
would
argue
have
with
walked
that.
through him
Yeah.
for a lot worse. I think the Adelaide anything other than an Australia win was going to be a massive surprise anyway.
Mhm.
So I think Australia. Essentially, people say they were front loading the series in terms of their
Mhm.
kind of. I mean, I'm not convinced that's an argument, but certainly, yeah, you could say that their stronger grounds were at the front. Although Gabba is now owned by Indians anyway. Um, shall we look forward then? Boxing Day Test match. Our guy Curran will be there actually, um, as will our producer actually Mark at the game. Australians are referring to MCG as the away game because the amount of Indians fans that will be there, not the team, but the fans and other I guess podcasters of Australian origin. Um, what are your thoughts of MCG in Sydney? I mean, as much as we can, given that things change every day and who knows what's going to happen when
Mhm.
your top spinner retires halfway through a series. Um, what are you thinking of for Melbourne Boxing Day,
Melbourne,
Karthik?
I think Melbourne is now not the Melbourne it was in say 2018-19 when it was a low bounce, slow kind of pitch where it was kind of a subcontinental kind of pitch, where India got on top. 21, it was quite helpful, I think, to the fast bowlers, but I think that little bit of early moisture, even I think India were very smart in how they used Ashwin early on with a newish ball, and Ashwin bowled beautifully as well. And he made the big difference when India came back in that series. But it was quite a good pitch for like seam bowlers throughout. And I expect it's going to be something like that, where the fast
Okay.
bowlers are going. So I don't think Melbourne is what it was in 2018 or in 2017. Was it when Alistair Cook just battered and battered and made like 230 odd So it's quite a helpful pitch. It has been over the last few years. So I expect that. And I don't think, yeah, the front loading did happen, I think. And I think the schedule and the fact that the series finished has to, like Melbourne has to start on Boxing Day and Sydney has, so it worked out that way as well. But I don't think it's going to be particularly like friendlier to India than the first three pitches were. Uh, so it's going to be a tough game for India with Boland coming back as well, and he
Yeah.
knows those conditions like nobody else, and his record there is of course ridiculous. So it's not going to be any more any less difficult for India to win in Melbourne.
Mm.
Uh, I think they'll be super happy that it's 1-1 now. And I do think if they, took the brave option, left out Nitish Kumar Reddy, played fourth fast bowler with Bumrah in the form that he's in, with Siraj in the form that he's in as well. Like he averages 23 through the series. So does Cummins. So, he's bowled really well. Akashdeep is bowling really well. So a fourth genuine fast bowler plus Jadeja, I think India can compete really hard if they go that that route. So it should be fun to watch. And Sydney, I don't know, like what the weather there is going to be like.
Well, we'll speak before Sydney anyway, so
Yeah,
we can.
yeah. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Boxing Day. Like it's going to be great.
I can't think of Melbourne without thinking of the Kamal Hassan song from
Oh,
Indian.
I only know the Tamil lyrics, but yeah, go on with the
Yeah, yeah,
English.
the Hindi version. She says Melbourne machli machalne wali. I don't know,
That's right. Yeah,
but you know the song I mean. Yeah.
of course. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
what are the Tamil lyrics?
Melbourne, Malarpool, Melliya Magada.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. On that note.
on that note, here's hoping for an MCG, a victory at MCG for
Yes.
India, and we shall leave it there. Make sure you check out this podcast on our socials. Just search Kumble Corner wherever you are on Instagram, etc. TikTok, no, not TikTok, Twitter or X as it is now. And thank you for liking and subscribing and following this show wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't done already, press the button. And from myself and Karthik, see you later. Bye.